Marcus Wellington was used to control. As a self-made millionaire in the tech industry, he ran his life like a machine. Clean, efficient, emotion-free. Every minute of his day was scheduled. Every item in his mansion had its place, and every person in his world, including his housekeeper, Sofia Morales, played a defined role. Sofia was quiet, professional. She arrived early, never lingered, and barely spoke unless spoken to. For 2 years, she blended into the background, like the hum of air conditioning, always present but unnoticed. Until things began to shift. It started subtly. Sofia showed up late one Tuesday. She forgot to restock Marcus's favorite brand of mineral water. Her uniform, always crisp, appeared slightly rumpled. She seemed distracted, caught up in thoughts that didn't belong in this pristine, orderly world. At first, Marcus brushed it off. But then came the receipts. A digital alert from his personal banking assistant showed an unusual transaction in his house account, one Sofia had access to for handling groceries and maintenance. An unfamiliar wire transfer had been processed, not to Marcus, not to a vendor, to Sofia herself. And then another one. She was moving large amounts of money, quietly, repeatedly. Marcus began to wonder, was she stealing, funding something illegal? Had she been using him all along? Driven by a growing sense of betrayal, something he hadn't felt since his early business days, Marcus did something uncharacteristic. He decided to follow her. One evening, instead of heading to his usual rooftop wine tasting, Marcus waited in his car, parked discreetly across from the back exit of his own estate. He watched Sofia leave, carrying a large duffel bag dressed in plain clothes. She took the train, another surprise. Marcus followed from a distance, weaving through the underground station like a man playing detective in his own life. She traveled to a neighborhood he hadn't been to in years. Eastwood, a part of the city most of his peers dismissed as up-and-coming, but really meant forgotten. She entered a faded red brick building with peeling paint and a broken neon sign, Eastwood Community Center. Marcus parked, waited, and after 30 minutes, curiosity overpowered his pride. He stepped inside. Marcus didn't know what he expected to find when he stepped through the heavy, faded door of the Eastwood Community Center. Maybe a small thrift shop, maybe a soup kitchen at best. But what he encountered was something far more profound. The building was worn, yes. Its walls bore the age of a place passed over by renovation budgets and forgotten by the city's wealthier districts. But the energy inside pulsed with life. Laughter echoed down the narrow hallways. The air smelled of arroz con pollo and fresh-baked pan dulce. But more than that, there was something intangible, a sense of belonging, of people gathering not because they had to, but because this place gave them hope. From a distance, Marcus spotted her. Sofia stood at the front of a makeshift classroom. The whiteboard behind her was streaked with worn-out markers, but her words rang clear. She wasn't just instructing elderly immigrants on how to conjugate verbs. She was translating dignity. Every lesson, every sentence she broke down was a brick in the bridge they were building to a better life. There was an older woman sitting in the front row, her eyes nervous as she repeated the phrase, "I am looking for a job." Sofia crouched beside her, holding her hand, whispering encouragement in Spanish. The woman smiled, confidence flickering across her face like light through a cracked window. It was in that moment Marcus understood. This wasn't just a side hobby or a volunteer gig. This was Sofia's mission. She had traded personal comfort for community service. She wasn't moving money for herself. She was bankrolling food drives, ESL programs, job training workshops. Every dollar she transferred, every hour she spent, was invested into people who would never be able to repay her. He followed the sound of music down the hallway and found a second room where teens huddled over laptops. A handwritten sign taped to the door read, "Homework help, 4 to 6 p.m. One of the boys, maybe 13, was guiding another through basic algebra, both grinning like they were solving rocket science. None of this was what Marcus had envisioned when he first suspected Sofia, and yet everything about it felt right. He watched silently as she unloaded the contents of her duffel bag, canned goods, blankets, a new box of pencils. No cameras, no recognition. Just a quiet rhythm of giving. She moved from station to station like she had done this 1,000 times, and maybe she had. This wasn't charity. This was love, organized. And in that instant, something in Marcus shifted. Not just his understanding of Sophia, but his understanding of value, of what wealth could actually do when it wasn't locked behind gates and guarded by lawyers. He had followed her expecting to uncover a secret. Instead, he discovered a mirror, reflecting everything his world had been missing. Sophia was used to scarcity. The Eastwood Community Center had long operated on the edge of collapse, held together by recycled materials, volunteer grit, and faith that somehow the next month's rent would come through. The building itself was a patchwork of donations, mismatched chairs, peeling linoleum floors, and a front desk made out of repurposed wooden pallets. No one came for comfort. They came because they had nowhere else to go. The morning she found the envelope, Sophia thought it was a flyer at first. Tucked into the doorframe, it was plain. No logo, no handwriting on the front, just a thick piece of paper that felt too formal for junk mail. Inside, a folded letter. One sentence. For the work that truly matters. And below it, a check. Sophia's hands trembled as she read the number again. $100,000. She blinked to be sure it wasn't a printing error. She held it up to the light, checking for signs of forgery, as if something that miraculous had to be fake. But it wasn't. It was real. And it was anonymous. For a moment, the noise of the community center faded. All she could hear was the thud of her own heart. She thought of the elders who used plastic bags as book covers, of the children who translated for their parents because no one else could, of the makeshift stove in the back kitchen, held together with duct tape and prayer. This donation wasn't just money. It was possibility. Within days, the transformation began. Sophia didn't waste a cent. She upgraded the center's entire language curriculum, replacing outdated worksheets with interactive tablets and real ESL software. She hired 2 part-time instructors, both of whom had once been students in her class. She installed ceiling fans to ease the brutal summer heat. Even the food pantry expanded, allowing families to take home extra supplies for the weekend. No press release, no ribbon cutting, just quiet, consistent progress. What struck Sophia the most wasn't the money, it was the trust. Whoever had sent it hadn't asked for recognition, hadn't included a business card, hadn't even demanded results. It was a gift given in full faith, the kind of support that speaks not only to generosity, but to belief. And belief, Sophia knew, was far more powerful than charity. The community responded in kind. Attendance doubled within a month. Word spread about the center's new programs. Seniors who had once shuffled in reluctantly now arrived early, smiling and ready. Some brought friends, others brought their grandchildren. They didn't know who the donor was, but they knew someone out there believed they were worth the investment. And that changed everything. Marcus had always believed problems could be solved with the right resources. Budgets, systems, a decisive pitch backed by hard numbers. That's how he built his empire, by recognizing talent, making the right offer, and watching it all fall into place. So when it came to Sophia, his plan was no different. After months of volunteering beside her, anonymously at first, then openly, he decided to formalize what he saw as her life's calling. He had drafted a proposal so polished it looked like it came from a Fortune 500 boardroom. A full-time executive position, running a citywide nonprofit built around Sophia's model, with access to his network, a private office, full autonomy, and a starting salary that would make most CEOs raise an eyebrow. He presented it like a gift, earnest, confident, certain he was doing the right thing. Sophia listened silently, her hands folded in her lap, eyes tracing the corners of the contract without touching it. When he finished speaking, the pause that followed was long. He was expecting enthusiasm, maybe tears of gratitude, at the very least, a nod. But instead, she spoke softly. "I'm honored, Marcus, truly, but I can't take this." He blinked as if he'd misheard. "You can't?" She met his gaze, unflinching. "This place, these people, they trust me because I'm one of them, not above them. If I take a job like this, I become the face of something I never wanted to commercialize. I lose the freedom to say no to the things that matter, and I can't risk turning this work into strategy." Marcus, uncharacteristically unsure, leaned forward. "But don't you see? With this role, you could help so many more. Bigger scale, real infrastructure." Sophia nodded. "I see that, but Marcus, your version of more means different. And I've worked too long and too hard to be a symbol when I want to be a servant. I'd rather keep sweeping the floor if it means I get to keep hearing their stories. She placed the proposal back on the table, gently like returning a borrowed book. I don't want to manage this mission. I want to live it. Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Rejection not of him, but of the world he'd built. And for the first time he realized, maybe that world wasn't built for everyone. Maybe it wasn't even built for him anymore. There was no anger, no bitterness, just understanding, and the heavy silence of two people standing at a crossroads neither of them expected to reach. They hugged, briefly. No promises, no future plans. Then she walked out of the room, her heels clicking down the hallway of a building she had filled with purpose, leaving Marcus alone with his offer, unopened, unread, and respectfully declined. In the weeks that followed their parting, something shifted inside both Marcus and Sophia. Not with drama, not with heartbreak, but with an aching absence that lingered like the echo of an unfinished song. For Marcus, the silence in his home grew louder. He found himself pausing in the hallway where Sophia once hummed softly while dusting the shelves. He walked past his now spotless kitchen, remembering the scent of her homemade arroz con leche, which she once shared with him on a rainy afternoon after the power went out. The richness of his life, the art, the tech, the imported coffee, suddenly felt sterile without the warmth she brought. But it wasn't just her presence he missed. It was the version of himself that only emerged when he was around her. With Sophia, he wasn't Marcus Wellington, CEO. He was simply Marcus, a man rediscovering what it meant to feel useful, not just successful. For Sophia, the change was quieter, but no less profound. She kept busy, as always, coordinating ESL classes, arranging food drives, helping a 72-year-old Cuban grandfather fill out a job application for the first time in 3 decades. But there was an absence in the moments between, in the pause after the day's work was done. She would catch herself glancing toward the door, half expecting Marcus to walk in with his rolled-up sleeves and his uncertain grin. And it wasn't his wealth she missed. It was his transformation. She'd watched him evolve, from suspicion to support, from distance to presence. She had seen him clean bathrooms without flinching, argue passionately for access to free transportation for the elderly, and take notes during her workshops like a student thirsty for more. The love that had taken root between them wasn't impulsive or fueled by physical attraction. It was born of shared purpose, 2 lives intersecting at the point where empathy becomes action. When Marcus returned to the center on Thanksgiving, it wasn't with a grand gesture. There was no limousine, no press release, just a man holding a tray of food, asking to be part of something bigger than himself, again. And for Sophia, that was enough. She didn't need flowers or apologies. She needed sincerity. And he brought it with him, folded inside tamales, behind tired eyes, and in the simple, unadorned words, "I don't want to buy your dreams. I want to build them with you." That moment, surrounded by families whose lives they had both touched, sealed something unspoken. It wasn't about rekindling a romance. It was about recognizing a truth they had both known all along. Their hearts were not just aligned by emotion, but by mission. And this time, they wouldn't walk away. The wedding wasn't held in a ballroom. There were no ice sculptures or string quartets playing behind champagne fountains. Instead, guests arrived at the Eastwood Community Center, now freshly painted and filled with the scent of marigolds and homemade pozole. The very place that once struggled to keep its lights on had become the heart of something far greater, a symbol of what real wealth could look like when it was shared. Sophia walked down the aisle in a dress sewn by a local seamstress, a flowing cream-colored fabric trimmed with delicate embroidery inspired by her grandmother's village in Oaxaca. Her bouquet? Wildflowers picked from a nearby park by the children she'd taught just a year before. Marcus stood at the altar, not in a tuxedo, but in a simple linen suit and worn leather shoes that had seen the insides of boardrooms and soup kitchens alike. But it wasn't the aesthetics that made this wedding unforgettable. It was the people. In the front row sat Mr. Alvarez, who had learned enough English to pass his citizenship test thanks to Sophia. Beside him, Mrs. Ramirez, who now ran her own tamale catering service after attending one of the center's entrepreneurship workshops, funded by Marcus. The guest list wasn't made up of CEOs and politicians. It was made up of lives touched, not bought. The ceremony itself was brief, but powerful. No pomp, just promises. "I vow," Marcus said, his voice steady, "to invest not just in companies, but in communities. To measure value not in dollars, but in dignity." Sophia took his hand, tears in her eyes. "And I vow to love with courage, to speak for the unheard, to remind you every day why you began this journey in the first place." Instead of wedding favors, every guest received a personalized letter written by either Marcus or Sophia, thanking them for their role in this shared mission. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, kids danced barefoot under hanging lights, volunteers shared stories over folding tables, and the couple, newly married, newly aligned, watched it all from a bench beneath the old oak tree that had shaded their first real conversation. This wasn't a celebration of a union between a millionaire and a housekeeper. It was the beginning of a shared purpose, a marriage rooted not in appearances or power, but in service, solidarity, and the kind of love that rebuilds not just lives, but entire communities. If this story touched you in any way, take a second to like this video. Share it with someone who needs a little reminder that compassion still exists. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories, and check the links in the description to follow us on social media. And remember, sometimes the greatest riches in life come not from what we own, but from what we give.